Hello everyone, welcome to this video lecture. This is actually a continuation of the previous lecture I made on liberal cyberfeminism. But the focus of this discussion will be on cyber masculinity. So in this video lecture, allow me to talk about how liberal cyberfeminism works in the context of computer-mediated discourses. And apart from that, I will also be tackling about cyber masculinity and heterosexism. So let us begin with this one. On a deeper note, liberal cyberfeminism has not been the exclusive property of cyber theorists and feminist pro-porn activists. We really cannot say that liberal cyberfeminism is something that is solely advocated by the pro-porn activists or liberalists, because its tenets have also been embraced by a number of participants in actual computer-mediated communication. Now, the online practice of this theoretical position is evidenced by the growing number of women who dabble in cross-expressing, a term used to refer to the conversational styles of telephone sex workers or the practice of verbal gender shifting. So one good example of cross-expressing is, for example, when a male uses a discourse which has dominant linguistic features that of a female. Let's say the use of emojis or emoticons in the context of contemporary discourses. So that could be an example of cross-expressing. Let's say you are a male and yet you are using a number of these emojis or emoticons, which is usually done by females. So that's an example of cross-expressing because there is verbal gender shifting happening. Okay, most especially or most apparently in the use of computer-mediated discourses. Now, as mentioned, I will be talking about cyber masculinity. The physical anonymity that fosters attempts at cross-expressing, however, also encourages a certain online hostility. And this one is very apparent with how cyber masculinity works in the virtual world. Researchers have studied the expression of affects in computer-mediated communication. And this has something to do with how emotions are put forward into discourses so as to make sure that there is no wrong with the cross-expression, there is no hate speech, okay? There is no inappropriate language used when exchanging computer-mediated discourses with other active participants in the virtual common. Now, one problem with cyber-masculinity is the conversational dominance. How does it happen? Now, we know that in the physical society, there is already this patriarchal outlook wherein males or men are dominant compared to women. Now, the majority, or in the virtual context, the majority of linguistic studies on gender differentiation in computer-mediated communication have actually paralleled the results of early feminist studies on face-to-face conversation on mixed sex groups. This means to say that there is actually no clear distinction as to how conversational dominance works in the physical world and in the virtual world. They are just totally alike. Most researchers found out that male participants, even when in cyberspaces, overtly formed for the discussion of feminism, silence their female conversational partners by employing electronic versions of the same techniques they have been shown to employ in everyday face-to-face interaction, such as ignoring the topics which women introduce, producing conversational floors based on hierarchy instead of collaboration, and dismissing women's responses as irrelevant. And that is how conversational dominance takes place in these examples mentioned here. For example, a man who is engaged in a conversation, let's say with women and men also, let's say produce floors or topics which could end up the conversation with the women, okay? Or when there is this high level of authority being observed in the exchanges of information or conversation, which could lead or result in the dismissal of women's responses as totally irrelevant or unimportant. Okay? That's one problem there. The second one is textual harassment. The linguistic observation that men talk more in mixed-sex electronic discussions, or that men regularly ignore women's topics in favor of their own discursive threads, actually does not account for the misogynist nature and aggressive sexual harassment over the virtual community. Okay? Because this feature is specifically true in the virtual common or in the virtual setting only. Now, the masculine discursive style witnessed on the internet is a kind of verbal violence that only rarely occurs between strangers in the non-virtual world, where its employment in casual interaction would be perceived as the exception and not the rule. Now, we know that there is this unique discursive style that males or men use, most especially when they are communicating in the non-virtual world. And that does not specifically true that, or that does not specifically follow that whatever discursive style being used by the males or the men in the non-virtual world is also the same as what they use in the virtual world. Okay? It does not follow at all times. Because again, we should consider both the external and the internal factors that could have contributed to the use of such a discursive style in the virtual platform. Then we need to understand also the concept of heterosexism. It is an important subgenre of cybermasculinity, which is called heterosexism, because it shows prejudice, which is realized on the internet through the proliferation of anti-homosexual discursive threads. Okay, so when you say anti-homosexual discursive threads, these are perhaps hate speech, okay, that advocate heterosexuality, okay, or the binary oppositions or the binary perspectives of gender, frequently instigated by male participants in mixed sex interaction as a means of sexualizing the discourse. Homophobic hate mail on public forums has escalated dramatically through the years. And this one is actually very evident not only in the previous times, but also in the modern times, okay? In the modern virtual world that we have. This one is very apparent, most especially if the topic has something to do with the LGBTQIA+ community. So it has become a very sensitive topic though online. For example, shortly after the lesbian and gay celebration of the 25th anniversary of Stonewall in New York City, a string of hate messages was sent to a public forum. And just look at how offensive the language or the discursive style is in the context of this public discourse. So you can see here different profanities used by the males just for them to attack the members of the LGBT community. Okay? The most striking line here is this: God hates fags, which refer to, the last word here refers to, of course, lesbians and gays. Now, we can already say that this is apparent not only in the virtual discourses or computer-mediated discourses before. This is very, very apparent, I have to say, even up until now. Because if you could check on the comments, let's say on Facebook, or let's say on how people attack through videos on TikTok, we can already say that there is still this heterosexism being proliferated online. Now, as a form of support and respect, let's have this comment. I think the jargon, cant, gibberish, and most unintelligible academic rambling of the year comments were a little out of line, especially since was making a perfectly valid point about respecting other spaces. So this is actually a reiteration of how important it is for us to respect people's opinions online. Now, even if they would say that, let's say, this one is just an opinion, remember that this is actually an attack to the person or to the community being referred to in the context of this post. And so it is just inappropriate. And hence, it is being emphasized here on equality of sexes and genders, most specifically in the context of this article that I am presenting. The author have identified two varieties of cyberfeminism. One inspired by the utopian imaginings of Haraway cyborg feminism, the other by the reality of male harassment on the internet. Okay? Now, Rossi Baidotti, a pioneer in virtual studies, recently made the observation. One of the great contradictions of cyber images is that they titillate the imagination, promising marvels and wonders of a gender-free world or a multi-gender world. And yet, such images not only reproduce some of the most banal, flat images of gender behavior imaginable, they intensify the differences between sexes. Now, this is what is wrong with the current virtual world. Okay? What is wrong is the fact that even if most people would advocate gender equality, okay, or respect for gender differences, there will always be these multimodal materials, okay, or other cyber images which reflect or project the opposite. The same is true of computer-mediated communication. Rather than neutralizing gender, the electronic medium encourages its intensification. And this is specifically true with the choice of words or the features that are used when delivering computer-mediated discourses. In the absence of the physical, network users exaggerate societal notions of femininity and masculinity in an attempt to gender themselves. For example, as what I mentioned as an example a while ago, let's say if you use a lot of emojis or emoticons, it may point out to your gender. Okay? Let's say you are very feminine if you use more emojis or emoticons when you deliver computer-mediated discourses. Okay? That is just how our features work. Okay? That is how these features work in online platforms. And these are actually advocating, okay, or suggestive of the binary perspective that there should be in terms of gender. Gender may well be an unfortunate dichotomy. True, there is really dichotomy because people once again believe that there should only be male and female, okay, like that. As postmodern virtual theorists argue, but cyberspace is generating goddesses and ogres, not actually cyborgs. Because if you say that if these virtual platforms are producing cyborgs, then there is no physical representation of gender alone. Okay, as mentioned a while ago, if you're a cyborg, even if you are physically male, you could be mentally or emotionally female. But in the context of modern or contemporary virtual world, with the features of all these virtual platforms, it is actually a projection that what we need to believe is that there are only two sides of the coin. Okay, it's either we see ogres or goddesses, or we see goddesses and gods. So it's up to us. But once again, what is being emphasized here is for us to respect the different genders that we have, and so it should be projected with the right choice of words as evidenced not only in our casual or physical conversations with people, but also in our virtual interactions with others. So I hope everything is clear with this brief discussion. Should you have any questions regarding this topic, kindly post them on the open forum. Thank you very much for listening to this video lecture.